At the risk of being too hyperbolic, I named this panel after we got off the prep call, the crypto's $1 trillion opportunity. But that's mostly because I truly actually do believe it. Like we've heard so many different times the different opportunities that crypto has. And you think back to like when you first heard about NFTs, everyone talked about, selling tickets and it's a great market opportunity. It's not $1 trillion, right? Like we talked about enabling, DRM and stuff like that. Great opportunity, and it's part of payments. Like these are $1 trillion opportunities we're seriously talking about. So without further ado, Rob, please introduce yourself, my friend.
Morning, everybody. Rob Massey. I'm a tax partner at Deloitte. And for 13 years, we've been serving in this space. That's a long time in crypto.
A long time. He's OG.
A little bit.
OG doesn't even begin to sum up Rob in the space.
But we're a big consulting firm, but within the 500,000 people we have in the firm, there's about 2,000 of us who spend a portion of their time or all of their time on crypto. I don't touch fiat as an example. Yeah. And so that's, I'm on the tax side. I tend to lead our practice just because I've done it a long time, but we also do audits and accounting and controls and risk and stuff. So all relevant to crypto. Really excited to talk to this today.
Smitha?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much. This is an amazing event. Like mimosas at 10 a.m. hit differently. So that's amazing. So thank you for this. Hi, my name is Smitha. I lead the product organization for PayPal and Venmo, both on the consumer and the merchant side.
Switch on the top.
That was well informed. Thank you. I'm Sergio Mello. I'm head of stablecoins at Anchorage Digital, which is a crypto platform for institutions. It's the most licensed crypto platform with a OCC charter by the bank regulator in the US. We also have a presence in Singapore and other countries. And I'm very excited. I definitely share the excitement that Pat brought us earlier. I can only recall one specific instant that ties it up to Satoshi's white paper of buying coffee, because 6 years ago I was experimenting with hacked Visa cards to use stablecoins over the Visa rails to buy coffee at Starbucks. So that's how I was testing it all the time. And if you check my LinkedIn profile, you can still see that video that is pinned as a badge of honor. And so, we're getting there. We're getting to the point where we can buy coffee with stablecoins and crypto, finally.
It's so funny because, that white paper came out, and then honestly, the first 3 years of crypto, this is like going way back if folks weren't in it, was literally just arguing about whether or not that was actually a real use case. It's like literally, we're 15 years later, it's so obvious, but the first 3 years of Bitcoin, they were like arguing about whether or not you would ever want to pay it, because at that point, they were trying to make Bitcoin very deflationary, and like it was just like designed to replace the Federal Reserve. And it was like, you wouldn't use gold to buy coffee, but so now we're on the other side of that. Well, so Smith, I want to start with you, and because at PayPal, part of what we want to talk about here is scaling digital asset payments. And PayPal does real scale in fintech, very unlike anyone else. So talk about how do you think about scaling fintech in general and then scaling the digital asset component of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at PayPal, when we think about scale, we see it in two different constructs. So the first construct is, I think everybody here with the payments background knows that payments is not just a movement of value from point A to point B, right? There's a lot that happens before. Think treasury management. There's a lot that happens after, which is reconciliation, accounting, tax, regulatory reporting. And so when we think about a scalable solution, we have to solve for the end-to-end, not just the movement of value, because that often is the easiest part of the puzzle, right? So for us, that's one construct of a scalable solution. The second construct is that at PayPal, we have merchants of different scale. So at the very high level, when you segment merchants, you have large enterprises, mid-market, small, medium, micro businesses, right? And so each of them, while the need is the same, which is how do I pay and get paid more efficiently, they do things very differently. They use different tools. And so for us, when we are building products around scalable B2B solutions, it has to address the needs of each segment differently, plus add on the complexity of PayPal being this global brand, 200 countries, and add on all of these individual complexities. And so for us, scalable is all of this together.
Yeah, it's the entire life cycle. That's a really good way to put it, because I even think about this for crypto as a great example. And part of the reason that we take so serious this idea that you can't monetize the rail anymore in a crypto world is in order to you're competing with MetaMask. You're competing with someone opening up their MetaMask and sending $1 billion around the world that quickly. So you have to think about the entire life cycle of that payment, which is a lot more complicated, not just that one piece of it. Sergio, I want to kick it over to you, and I'll keep on coming back to you as the Anchorage person here to talk, because especially with the Bybit hack, I think security is back on everyone's mind. The way I think about crypto is like every year, security, you kind of forget about it. Weird Al used to say this. He's like, everyone forgets I exist. And then once every 5 years, they remember I exist and they all forget I exist again. Security is a little bit like that in crypto, where everyone forgets security exists. And then the Bybit hack happens. Whatever the hack happens, we have to go back to think about it. So I'd like to talk just a little bit, while we're getting to this, talk about scaling the actual financial operations around digital asset payments. If we're going to actually move $1 trillion through these platforms, and you as a business are paying out tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, how do you actually think about security from an organizational standpoint?
Oh, it's hard to answer all of that in just a few minutes. First of all, linking back to what Smita said, I really like the term rail, of course, being a payments aficionado, but I think we need to start thinking of airways when it comes to digital asset payments. Rails are, by definition, two bars of metal that will keep you going straight. Whereas the beauty now is that the same network can be accessed by infinite amount of participants, especially in permissionless networks. So really, we have to start remapping the terms. And remapping the terms is key to answering your question about scalability. It cannot happen without proper infrastructure. It cannot happen without proper regulation. So my answer to scalability is yes, look at compare vendors based on regulatory and compliance and licensing, compare them based on audits and third-party assessments, compare them based on performance. Don't stick to just one vendor, definitely. Redundancy and multiple choices is always better. Vertical integration has been possible, and in crypto because it was the only choice. So answering to your Bybit question, it's very unfortunate what happened, but really, let's face it, exchanges and major players in the crypto industry didn't really have a lot of choice until recently, and so they had to build all the stack by themselves, or at least they chose to for optimization purposes. So now it's a time where payment companies, enterprise entering the crypto payments landscape have the luxury of having seen others making the mistakes and can choose better options that are again, I repeat, regulated, licensed, audited, and tested. That's what happens. I encourage having two co-founders that were security engineers and started the company purely and solely for solving for safe crypto custody, and then evolving into really becoming a bank. It's a luxury point of view here because we see it from the security standpoint first. I would encourage any new entrants in the industry to look at that metric and see who focuses on security first and doesn't just put it as one of those green boxes on the comparison list and checkpoints.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I might chime in and just say, the Bybit hack, good reminder. We remember again, and we've been dealing with designing risk and control frameworks for custodians, payment networks, exchanges for a number of years, and it is different. It is different muscle to build risk and control frameworks using or surrounding crypto than it is fiat or commodities or whatever else it is. I mean, this is entirely different stuff, and you have to think with that mindset. It's not taking the old way and saying, how is it different? No. And I really like the rail versus air analogy, really suspend reality and say, what do we need to do different? Because, we're getting attacked from ways that we can't even understand where it's coming from. That's a totally different muscle. So, reinventing and from our perspective, because of the risk and control focus that we have as a firm, it's not just the exchanges and the custodians, but now it's the corporates that have either started to engage in crypto or thinking about it. They're like, oh, this is still a thing. All right, let's take this serious.
Well, it's so uncommon businesses don't allow a lot of people access to their bank accounts. It's just the way businesses are set up. And in order to create a bank account, almost every business needs to go to a board directive. Let me tell you what you don't have to do to create a wallet is get your board involved in that decision. So you're having to think about that stuff entirely differently. Rob, let me ask you about, because I want to come back to the risk control in a little bit, but let me ask you another part of the scalability question here, which is how do you actually get your business to want to do this? Because this is how we scale as an industry, not as on the macro scale, not the micro scale. How do you actually start to build up leadership? How do you get your leadership involved in wanting to do more payments? And we talked about cost and speed and things like that. You do a lot of this. This is a lot of your job is talking to the CEOs of these big banks and stuff. Like, how do you get them excited about this stuff?
I mean, they get excited about this and the numbers that you throw in there. This is top of mind for everybody. It's been more top of mind in the last probably 6 months. But the key is to have stakeholder management, but somebody at the top with a voice that carries through multiple departments. Because when we're talking about crypto, we're talking even stables, it feels like money. It's not. This is property of some kind. And so it is inherently different for everyone in the organization. It's different for the treasury group. It's different for the accountants. It's different for the tax people. It's different for the attorneys. And you actually have to get them all on the same Zoom. You get them in the same room if you can, and listen to one another, because you can't assume what the other person does with this stuff. It's different for everybody. Yeah. So it's just a different exercise. Having somebody at the top of the house with the right voice, and you look back over the last 10 years, the early adopters that really took this serious, the common factor has been somebody in a tenured role that demanded that everybody focus on this collectively, not just a side project, but really pay attention. And they're the ones that are top of the house today, some of the biggest holders out there. But it was some of the executive management team said, this is real, pay attention. Yeah. It's different, it's hard. It's real. Yeah, I mean, I used to work at Cisco, so I can beat up on Cisco. They had that issue where blockchain for Cisco, one of their huge problems is supply chain. They have an enormous supply chain, tons of complexity. Their little blockchain project, they stuffed it in Cisco research. They didn't really have a big executive sponsor. It was like a kind of a toy little project to look at what this could be, and nothing's really happened from it. Then, so it's one of those things that, like, when you see the folks who were incredibly successful, like PayPal's a great example, they actually had top level like leadership really going after it. It's a totally different motion that the entire company goes through.
I think the first step for us, like even within PayPal, is just having the understanding of what is the risk appetite, right? Because these are like risk-based decisions that the business has to make, and just understanding which organization has what risk appetite, like, goes a long way in terms of how you position these products, right? And the other big thing that has like really hit me in the last couple of years is just having empathy for people in those roles. I mean, like, earlier in my career, I used to be like, oh my God, this takes so long. We can't launch stuff. Like, what is the hold up? And it just takes so long, right? But now, as like I'm getting into conversations with regulators, getting into conversations with the head of compliance, there's just so much they have to deal with, and so it's like, how do you remove and make their life easier versus adding to their problems? I think that positioning goes a long way in getting alignment.
For a long time, that was Bitwave's tagline, was like, the day you as the CTO bring digital assets on the balance sheet, you just made the CFO's life terrible. Like, and you should probably think about that a little bit and figure out how to solve those kinds of problems.
But that is our job, is to calm people down. Like, how do you approach this thoughtfully, looking at the experience, looking at the patterns, what have we been dealing with over the years, right? This is not new for many of us here. So use the experience that we've gained, a lot of it inspired by the unfortunate events, right? So, let's remember that again, and let's level it up.
I think that, so Sergio, I think that segues pretty nicely into you, because one of the things that has changed is that when we talk about digital assets, we're not actually talking about companies bringing a bunch of Bitcoin onto the balance. That is happening, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about stablecoins. Like, we're talking about something that's a little bit more, that it's a little bit more palatable to the CFO, like it's less likely to lose money. There's some new models around actually yield-bearing stablecoins. How do you see enterprises and B2Bs adopting stablecoins? What do you see as some of the I don't know, does that make it a lot easier? And then maybe even just tell us a little bit about the stablecoin business in general. I think folks are all interested.
Yeah, of course. So the title of this panel is $1 trillion opportunity, and that's exactly what we're heading with stablecoins. I think that definitely by the end of this year or beginning of next year, we'll see $1 trillion circulation of stablecoin. And this is not DeFi, degen, meme coin activity. This is money that is no longer circulating on rails, but is circulating on airways. And it's simply a displacement of M2 that shifts from one environment to another. It's still the same money, but it's a different representation, different technology to carry it around and hold it. So the yield-bearing stablecoin is a term I love and hate, because any money instrument should have some attachment to underlying yield, and stablecoin have this beautiful property that can decouple the underlying yield making property from the payment instrument property. And so the ability to send it around and decide at the origin or at the issuer level whether the yield follows the token or tracks it in a corporate environment, or whether it's completely decoupled and stays where it's generated and originated. That's how you define stablecoins. Then you have a whole plethora of purely decentralized $1 instruments. I don't call them stablecoins, that are instead more like hedge funds and trades on chain, which are beautiful and can be used as a payment instrument. Because if I want, I can pay Smita with this microphone.
Yeah.
And if she accepts it, that's a payment instrument. So anything can be a payment instrument based on acceptance. Yeah. So I would say that the biggest opportunity for the payment instrument is those fiat-backed, regulated, high-quality, liquid asset-backed stablecoins that we've already seen working. The distribution game is exactly what's going to differentiate one from the other. Yeah. And so in the next 4 years, we will see alliance-based stablecoins that will put together multiple industry partners and enterprise to jointly join forces in distribution and reap the benefits of the underlying yield resharing. There's single-player games that are going on in Washington today and globally that have already been launched. But really, what we have to understand is that narrowing it down just to using a token for a payment is a bit diminishing, and really you don't grasp the full complexity and potential of the instrument. So it's Airways, it's not Rails. So once you start putting your stable coins on your balance sheet, first of all, I would strongly suggest to mark it to $1 per dollar, because that's if you have a good issuer, that's what you get on redemption. So I think it's a lot of wasted effort to try to look at the secondary market for marking stablecoin balance sheet prices. But beyond that, you need to understand the implications are different. And risk management wise, Smita, you mentioned the risk appetite factor and risk measured approaches in understanding digital assets on balance sheet and enterprise world. The real complexity and the real challenge here is quantifying the risk. Yeah. We all know there's risk and stuff, and so with stablecoins, at least we got to a certain point of maturity in the evolution of the markets, where via legislation upcoming, hopefully soon here, and by experience, we understand the systemic risk and counterparty risk components of evaluating a single stablecoin risk on a balance sheet. So we're getting there. We're getting to the point where we can make the CFOs comfortable, I think, today.
If anyone here can get Washington on the phone, I mean, my biggest request personally for the stablecoin legislation coming out is basically that we get very, very clear guidance that a yield-bearing stablecoin is not a security and falling under the SEC guideline. Because that's honestly one of the biggest issues with them right now, is this issue of that if this is security or not. It creates this whole problem where, basically you can't then issue yield-bearing stablecoins that share with the users themselves and the holders. It creates it so much more complicated to actually do that. That's my wish list item for 2020, 2025 here. Because I think that it's just such a tremendous thing. Like when we talk about payments, like one of the things we talk about when we talk about float is like the old world was that you are paying 4 days of float to somebody else. The new world is that your interest will immediately, the second you move it, you are starting to now earn that interest. Like this, it's like the exact opposite of the world that we happen to be living in before.
I need some sound advice here. I can see why some industry players and financial institutions are not really welcoming this. Partly because the float all of a sudden goes to the rightful owners, and partly because all the way down to retail, but that's another kind of worms. But partly because the broad money creation and fractional reserve practice by banks all of a sudden can be highly diminished if stablecoins start circulating more 100%. Broadly, and so I can see the tension there.
Oh yeah. So Rob, let's bring it down to let's go back to compliance for a little bit. Yep. Let's to you and me's favorite part of this world: tax, compliance, all those kinds of things. in the digital asset payment world, so in this world where we're holding either yield-bearing stablecoins, non-yield-bearing stablecoins, whatever it is, let's talk about all the different implications here. So your favorite world here is tax. Let's start with tax.
Oh gosh, all right.
You're probably like,
everybody's
Sergio
going to
just
leave
said-
the room when we do this.
Well,
All right.
Sergio said, don't worry about marking them down. And I'm probably Rob inside a little bit was like, oh, yeah.
I always have to say, look, it's not money, it's not property, and you got to put the right lenses on it. There's a different accounting lens, whether that's GAAP or IFRS. There's a different tax lens. Pick a country, pick a state. And you need to think about it that way. But it's not money, it's not currency until we get to CBDCs, which would be a different panel, presumably. but think about, and you referenced it earlier, Pat, and even with stables that feel like money, they don't fluctuate much in terms of value. A receipt of a stable coin in the new world, much like a receipt of fiat currency, cash. Back in the day when you would walk into a bank with a suitcase full of bills, they would ask you to fill out a form. Anybody remember this time? They'd ask you to fill out a form. It still exists. Form 3800 is still a thing today. We don't think about this much today because most people move money electronically. But a bill was passed. There's a law, 6050I, that says if you take in crypto of $10,000 or more, you have to fill out a form, KYC the payor, and make sure you send it along. So that is law. It would have been effective as of Jan 1 last year, but it was delayed. And at some point in time, Treasury may publish Treasury regulations, which will then make it give it an effective date. So that is presumably coming. We'll see where it goes, but it is still law, just not yet effective. Yeah. That's weird.
Yeah.
That's new muscle. We're not used to that, but presumably any recipient of payments, part of your $30 trillion number, presumably would have to build in a compliance function to deal with that.
Yeah.
So that's different.
And you can imagine that. I mean, for me, I think that might end up being something Bitwave does, and we have some partnerships there. Sure. It might end up being something that MetaMask has to do. Like if you get a sufficiently large deposit, you might have to click through and do all the compliance piece right there.
Yeah, and I mean, different motivations to this rule, and most people think, okay, this was for crypto, but the definition of digital asset they used is inclusive of stables. So just to throw it out there, and anything can change, as we've seen with the regulatory environment. I mean, other common topics, we are seeing stables used a lot, receipts from customers, but also payments to vendors. I know we're going to talk about that, and also payments to employees.
Yeah.
So while withholding taxes are a thing, whether you're withholding payroll taxes from an employee or it's withholding taxes for a cross-border transaction. Most federal governments and most states don't accept stables today as a means of payment. Excuse me. So that puts you in the middle as the payor. You need to convert that to fiat and remit fiat. That's weird. It's just clunky. It's process. There's controls around that. You just got to remember that stuff you got to build into your process.
Yes. And that'll be, the latter part of the panel will be talking about the stuff we're excited for in the future. And that's one of the things is you can imagine on-chain payroll contracts that automatically sweep off exactly what they need to the agencies. The other one I was going to mention that's worth on the compliance side, everyone does, I think one of the use cases is starting to pay, employees at crypto companies starting to pay them with crypto. There are states that's not legal. Like there are states where it is explicitly illegal to actually settle payroll through digital assets. I assume you probably know better than me that applies to stablecoins too, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's picking this up, one by one about what's appropriate. But the fact is, the concept of a barter transaction, that's what we're talking about here, right? If it's not money, we're exchanging property in exchange for services or other property. That's a barter transaction. And there's rules to deal with that.
Yeah.
So if it's accepted as a payment, you just have to apply the general property lens, and then what do I do with it? And this is going to have a different implication, whether it's cross-border. We don't have tax treaties to deal with this yet. It could be indirect tax like VAT abroad or sales tax here. You deal with, what does a return look like on a debt instrument? Yeah. So you just have to pause, put the tax lens on it and say, what's the thing? Some of us in the room have a t-shirt on the back that says, what's the thing? Which is a silly question, but it's entirely appropriate today to say, what do I have? How do the rules change when the payment mechanism is not money?
Yeah, the part is when we have an employee that wants to get paid in crypto, it becomes an HR issue that we kick it over to our HR team to go and do the research, look at the legal and the legislation, and then it also after that becomes an accounting issue because it's a pain in the ass to do. It's not as simple as you would think. There's a lot of complexity to how are you going to value it? How are you going to what price are you going to use? Do you deliver it based if it's a commission? Do you do it based off the original token amount or off the dollar amount and convert it? So, if you're looking to pay employees, which I think is certainly part of this, it's a great use case, but it's not free. It doesn't just happen. You got to actually think about it a little bit.
but worth it. I mean,
It's worth it.
people do this because they're like, wow, there's all kinds of benefits, some of which
yeah.
you've described. But it's critical that you have a subledger in the background. Like,
yeah.
there's too many people that are like, oh, we'll just do this manually. Bad idea.
Yeah.
And nowhere near its scale. You must have the subledger in the background to be thoughtful about catching all these nuances. And it's not just tracking the same level of data that we have with fiat, by the way.
Yeah.
There may be different data elements that we're capturing because it's property that are needed. So you really have to say, how is the design of our flows, how does that impact the data collection in the subledger so that then you capture it and can be compliant?
Yeah, and the volume on this stuff is incredible. Smith, I want to change tax just a little bit here. Something that PayPal is incredible at, and that getting back to scale a little bit, is vendor onboarding. So this is something that I'm not sure we could have a better person on stage to talk about how you either on the macro scale or the micro scale get vendors that you might pay to adopt digital assets than you. Tell us about vendor onboarding, because it's a huge thing.
Yeah, I think vendor onboarding has been like one of the topics that we really think about deeply, right? And so if you and this is back to like empathy and back to the fact that we don't have systems that track the end to end. And so one of the key challenges for vendors to accept crypto payments is, great, you will pay us, but what after that, right? And so we've seen that we've made payments, but then it instantly gets converted back to fiat because all of the accounting systems are set up for fiat, right? And so I strongly believe that once you solve the end to end, that's where the true adoption is going to happen. But from the vendor onboarding perspective, I think the biggest use case here is like cross-border transactions, right? Cross-border commerce. And we've done some research, and we found that in countries like Kenya, and you actually have to pay like 4% for an incoming international wire, right? And so the merchant has to pay for the wire, the receiver has to pay for receiving the wire, and so that is a lot of like huge costs. And so just to be able to kind of bring that story together. The other piece is that today, still the stablecoin utility end-to-end doesn't exist, right? And so the ability to have good on and off ramps so that once you get a payment that you can off ramp and actually do business. So that's crucial, right? And so when we build this whole vendor onboarding, we kind of look through that, right? How do you help you with the end-to-end? How do you help you on and off ramp? And then how do you make sure it's worth your while?
So, I have a question for you and Sergio. I want you guys to battle this out. I don't know if you will disagree or not, but I'm curious. Okay. Do you think that what we're going to see, because international remittance is by far the killer application here, right? You mentioned 4%. I mentioned 2 weeks. Like these things, like it's insane, right? This idea of paying that is just nuts. Do you think we're going to see a world where there will be stable coins for all of the different currencies in the world, and we'll do things like on-chain swaps to go from USDC to GBP or whatever the local currency is, and then they'll do on-ramp, off-ramp in their local currency? Or do you think we'll see a just homogenization of US dollar support where everyone just takes US dollar, and either you have easy off-ramp in your country or you end up, like Turkey is a really good example. Like you can go to a lot of places in Turkey and buy a cup of coffee. Everyone just wants to buy coffee. Is that all? Can we all just get along? Like you can buy coffee with USDT. Like that exists today. That's a soup to nuts, like east to west, like complete life cycle around stablecoins. So what do you think happens? Do you think we see everything homogenized to USD style like stablecoins? Do you think we actually start to see stablecoins in all different jurisdictions?
First the latter, then the first. So, which one is first?
So the first would be that everyone builds their own stablecoin, and we have swaps, and it's all on-chain swaps back and forth, and we just Forex markets move on-chain.
No, first the latter. So what's already happening is that via stablecoin sandwiches and other menu items, we can get institutions and retail and peers all together to do the cross-border and enhance the dollarized economy and enhance the hegemony of the US dollar, which is all great. The next step will be to have issuers locally. I'm following certain jurisdictions with large M2 supplies. They're all looking into allowing M2. They are looking into allowing stablecoin issuance onshore or offshore, but of their own currency. Mm-hmm. And that's going to make the second happen. It is interesting to look at an existing model for onshore currency circulation, pre-stablecoins. That is the Chinese model with the CNH offshore yuan. And that has already set a precedent for a structure of clearing institutions that act as an interface between the foreign circulation and the domestic circulation. That could be an enabler for certain countries that enact currency control and capital control.
Yeah.
That's one step to get there, but I absolutely agree with you that the final solution will be to have the FX market move on chain as much as possible.
I think I completely agree, right? But there's
Shoot. Come on,
there's,
Must be something.
there's a short-term and a mid-term view and a long-term view, right? I think in the mid-term, it's still going to be US dollar-based stablecoins. But yesterday, actually, it was a very interesting talk on bringing the FX on-chain. And so I feel like in the long term, it is going to get into locally denominated stablecoins, but it's not close yet.
Yeah. Rob?
We're not done with this topic. I mean, this is really interesting how people are jockeying for position strategically right now, and they're looking at stable coins in different currencies. 100%. Remember, first off, that the FX conversion in stables different than FX, so there's different tax rules in play here. Just to remind everybody, but we will see this happen, and it may be inconsistent. There may be economies around the world that are just like, what we're using here doesn't work, and we've seen that happen a little bit with Bitcoin in parts of the world. We also may see it with stables. And you call it the US dollar, call it the euro, whatever it is. But do you have to have central bank issued currency in that jurisdiction? Well, if you have enough, not rails, if you have air driving what's going on with these other topics, you may see that happen. And I think the momentum on the stablecoin bills today here in the US, which if you look at the Venn diagram, there's an awful lot in the center, which means something's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
When you look at the momentum here in the US, I think everybody around the world is waking up saying, oh, okay, let's talk about the drivers for those bills and what they're doing. We need to pay attention to that and what's happening in the counter jockeying for position around the world for stables and other currencies.
Yeah.
That's happening.
Crypto is no longer a four-letter word in the ecosystem here. So you can actually start to look at this more pervasively. It will be interesting. I actually hadn't thought about the example of China with their bifurcated. So that's actually a really, really good example of where you have a country that is currency controlled on it. Fascinating. Good conversation. All right. This is my favorite part of the presentation here, is talking about the future. Because that's ultimately that's what we're all here for. Payments, okay, we could just be moving things of, suitcases of cash around, or drug dealers that use paintings. And that's kind of fun, to be honest. If I had paid bills with paintings, that'd be kind of cool. But let's actually talk about what are the unique things that digital assets enable in the world to happen. So Rob, I'm going to go to you first because I love your use case, which is DRM and that kind of actual flow through. And so Jim, who's somewhere in the audience, our CRO, just loves this. All he can talk about is this world where royalties and stuff.
I mean, the primary difference is the fact that we have funds now that are programmable. And so to the extent that, and digital rights management is an overused phrase, but in my mind, when you have rights attached to a thing, an electronic piece of art, let's talk about art, let's talk about digital art where you have multiple contributors to that digital art, and everybody has rights buried in a legal agreement that are probably misreferenced and infrequently read. But if you embed those rights into a smart contract and the only access to that digital art is via programmable funds, then you have a near real-time split, a near real-time redistribution of those stables of programmable funds, whatever you're going to use, back to the holders, those that have rights. You have transparency in the contract. You can compare that to the legalese. You still need the attorneys, right? Compare that, and then you have transparency about what that is. Now, think about that at scale. If y'all haven't read Read, Write, Own by Chris Dixon, this is the own part, where you get to own that which you build, and that is yours inextricably. And now think about the redeployment of all the access to that intangible that you had a hand in, so that you're now remunerated on a near real-time basis. That's badass.
Yeah.
And that at scale is transformative.
Yeah.
Enabled by the way, and just to round this out, it's not just getting it into the hands, but allowing it into somebody like PayPal so that we have an off-ramp, right? Because your user base is superior to probably anybody else's in the room, I think, right? In terms of an on-ramp, of an off-ramp. But this is the key, is it's not just the enterprise level, but get it back into the hands of the consumer, those who own the intangibles. So the pieces are coming together.
Yeah, and I'm gonna riff on this one. Then I'll let you guys close it out. There's a lot of things that I'm super excited about, but there's this one near-term one that I think is hilarious and relates to this, which is that for most of the 20th century in terms of like B2B payments, everyone has done net 30 and they've put really strict terms and like penalties and like, if you're this late, you'll get this penalty and things like that. I think that like the actual enforcement of penalty terms on invoices is probably, someone's got to do research. It's probably like 1%, if even that. And it's only like someone like Walmart that just really like beats the crap out of folks that are doing it. You put that all in smart contracts, something that's it's not me as the accountant being a dick, making you pay this penalty and sending you a nastygram. It's like, well, no, we got this. This is a smart contract. You pay through it, and you paid on the wrong day, so you had to pay 1% more. You paid 3 days early, and you paid with ETH, so you got to pay 3% less. That's the stuff that gets me really excited. Like we internally around the payments product call it dynamic terms, and it's this idea that you can do these incredibly sophisticated dynamic terms that like, basically if you get to day 35 and let's say you get to day 34, and we were giving net 30 for USD, but net 35 for USDC, you suddenly like backed yourself into the corner where you actually have to pay with USDC, because that's, if you don't, you're going to get penalized for it and all that kind of stuff. So I see a world where actually like contracts begin to be more enforced than they kind of previously were. Smitha?
Thing I'm super excited about is I think micropayments. So like it's incredibly expensive to do it on the current rails, right? And so with our ability now to actually do transactions at like for 2 cents, that then enables, I think, businesses to think about their subscription models differently, right? And it could be that pay as you go and pay for what you use and things like that. So I think that in the next couple of years, you'll see a lot more brands that are very subscription driven going into getting like pay as you go kind of services.
Yeah, you can even see like AI is already starting to move that way. There's a ton of overlap between AI and blockchain, and like really good things to happen. And this one of those things like definitely is going to be pay as you go for like the hyper intelligent, because OpenAI cracks me up. Where it's like people every time they offer a new product that's more expensive, people will pay for it. So offer something that's like $1,000 an hour that's just like an entire data center to use, and people will pay for like 10 minutes of that, and they'll pay you the $100 for it. Sergio, take us home.
Breaking the barriers. So all rent-seeking incumbents should really be fearing for what's coming in an ability of all the middle layers of the value chain to start expanding into the upper and lower layer and conquer what was initially gate-kept only for certain institutions or certain type of businesses.
Yep.
Of course, payments and banking is very ripe for this type of transformation.
And it's going to be hard for them. I've been picking on Bill.com a lot because someone who's 65% of the revenue is something, you can't turn that off. Like if your business is 65% of the revenue that's this thing, you can't just flip that off. You cannot disrupt that. Otherwise you destroy yourself as a public company. That's a painful, destructive process that we're going through. You guys,
last word. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's amazing. Thank you. Thank you, guys. This is amazing.
This is awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for the audience to be
My
patient and
favorite
listen.
panelists. Thank you so much, you guys.